Well, hi, everyone. We are so excited to be here with you at the summit. We just want to thank Steve and the IBAM team so much for inviting us to be a part of the summit, to be here with all of you today. I'm Melissa Whaley,
And I am RJ Whaley.
and we are going to be talking about something really special and dear to our hearts today, and that is
How your marriage is your first ministry, and that when it thrives, your business thrives. And when it's neglected, everything suffers.
Yeah. And before we dive into our topic today, we wanted to tell you a little bit more about ourselves. So, we have been married for 17 years. We met in college, Bible college,
Mhm.
and we now have 6 kids.
Yep.
And what do we do?
We run a coaching practice. We focus on marriage and relationships in that practice, which has been such a blessing to us. And we love working with those that run businesses or ministries. And we want to build the marriages of those people because they're the ones that serve the kingdom.
But before we got into coaching, we did a lot of other things.
Yeah, I spent 12 years in education, K-12 education, and enjoyed that, but I'm happy to be free.
And I actually spent the good chunk of our marriage working in accounting, running businesses, and also homeschooling our kids. We both have a background and training in ministry as well, and have served in a lot of different positions, both in volunteer ministry throughout our local church bodies, parachurch ministries, and then more recently took a leap into full-time coaching. But we will be sharing more of that story in a little bit. First, we kind of want to lay the foundation of what we're talking about today and why it matters.
Yes. If we look back at the scriptures, we go to the end of the first chapter of Genesis. And God says, God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. And as we were prepping for this and we were talking about it and thinking about it, I realized that this verse really is important to what we're talking about, how marriage comes first, because the first part of the blessing there is be fruitful and multiply. That is predominantly a relational reality, right? This is what we're meant to do. The next thing was fill the earth and subdue it, which is what we consider business or productivity in the world. And I think that plays into this talk because marriage is central to our very purpose on this planet, not just what we do with the rest of our time. And because of that, marriage and family are our first calling. And the marketplace and business are the overflow of that. When we do well in one, we're far more likely to do well in the other. And even when we don't, still have a good foundation because the most important parts of our relational reality here on earth are solid. You see this kind of reflected again in Matthew 6, verse 33, where Jesus says, but seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. Right? Our priorities need to come first. Our marriage, our families need to come first. Our relationship with God, obviously. And then the overflow is everything else. Seek first his priorities, and then we get the overflow through that. So this ties into what this whole conference is about, because the kingdom impact that we want comes out of the generosity from the Holy Spirit, which we get when we prioritize things the way that God has created them to be.
Yeah, absolutely. So, this idea that our ministries begin at home and that the outflow of that can be so impactful and so generous, and the discipleship, we start by discipling within our marriages and then in our families. And so the first thing that we really want to talk about is this idea that thriving marriages can equal thriving businesses. So, really, as we think about our story and how we ended up becoming marriage and relationship coaches, is what happened to get us here. So, RJ, why don't you share a little bit about that?
We've always had the desire to work together, but it never quite came to fruition. We kept trying, it kept failing. And over time, as I think many marriages have, we found ourselves in a crisis. And that crisis forced us to look for help. We found help in the form of marriage coaches ourselves. And that coaching that we received helped get us into a place where we felt like we had a healthy enough marriage to begin to revisit that topic of what does it look like to work together. And it was at that point that we felt the calling to move into serving marriages through coaching ourselves.
Yeah. And so this idea that we always felt a calling, we always had this desire to work together, to serve together, to really, we both had a passion for running businesses and wanted to have a business together. But every attempt that we made in our different areas of expertise always fell flat. There was always conflict. We never could have unity in what we were doing. And we thought that we just weren't finding the right business. And maybe that was part of it. But ultimately, what was pulling us apart and creating this disunity is that we hadn't been investing in our marriage and our relationship first before we invested into trying to launch another business or trying to step into another position of ministry. We were still very self-focused instead of marriage focused. And so once we were able to, one, heal our marriage and get to a place where we really felt like a team, we felt unified in our purpose and in our calling. And that gave us so much more clarity on exactly where we wanted to go and what we wanted to do. And then secondarily, because we had this shared vision, this shared sense of calling and purpose, that also gave us a lot more confidence to step out in faith and make this big leap, because before we went into full-time coaching, we were still trying to manage and juggle and spin a lot of plates, if you will. And so by having a healthy marriage, that really allowed us to take that leap.
Yes. And in doing so, it allowed us to, align what God has called us to in our kingdom roles into what we do for a living. And everything kind of fell into place as we focused on the important things first and then moved on to the next things. I have just been so blessed by the process of learning what does it look like to be connected in marriage well, and then sharing that unity, sharing that vision, and coming up with a healthy marriage. But neglecting creates some challenges for us or for any person, right? When we neglect our marriage and our family, for whatever reason, it costs us. And we both know this. We both grew up in families where our parents started and ran businesses. And so we saw that impact on our marriage or on their marriages and on our lives as children growing up in those houses. Me personally, because of the industry my parents are in, my dad was gone a lot. And those long hours had an impact on my relationship with him, and clearly had an impact on the relationship between my parents. And it made us feel, I think, collectively a little bit less important. And that definitely changed what I saw and what I expected, even in our own marriage as we moved into marriage ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think from my experience as well, I saw a lot of effort on my parents to grow and solidify their business so that they could support the family with great intentions. But ultimately, what it led to is prioritizing business needs over family needs. It led to a lot of times where my parents weren't available to me and my sibling, and that created some tension and issues even in my own identity of what did I believe about who I was and how my family was going to be there. And what happened is that what I saw modeled for me is then kind of what I brought into my first business. So when my kids were still tiny, I got into accounting and taxes and bookkeeping, and I decided I was going to launch my own business. I was going to work from home and be this unicorn mom that ran her business from home and was still present to her kids and still took care of the household and was present to her husband. And that is the exact opposite of what happened. And I think a big part of this is because of what was modeled for me is that I began to put my business above my family. I began to put all my energy and effort and time into building my business, which then led to needing more childcare, working late at night, and just really seeking first the success of my business instead of my relationship with the Lord and my marriage and my family. So really the opposite of what the message we're looking at from Matthew 6:33 of seeking first his kingdom and then the rest will be given to you. I did the exact opposite. I sought first my business and the rest started to erode right from under us.
Yeah. And I think that that led to or contributed to a lot of the problems that we had that put us into crisis, right? That her her business and then my work as a teacher led to a lot of burnout between the both of us. It led to a lot of conflict in our marriage as we didn't give it the time and the energy that it needed. And it caused some disconnection with our kids as well as we had, during this time, we're still having kids, but we're not always in a good place or even mostly in a good place. And so our kids felt a lot of that as well. And ultimately, it created the necessary pain to force us into the help that we needed. And what's redemptive about that is that as we got the help, we began to realize that a legacy that we want to leave is not predominantly about how much money we have in the bank or what we can leave to our kids financially. It's more about the values we pass on to the next generation, right? We both learned firsthand when we looked at our parents and looked at the way in which they navigated this, that we didn't want the relationship that they had, not because they weren't trying, but because we don't want that. We want something much more than that. We want our kids to see that as well. And so when the family is fractured, it doesn't just hurt the family, it also weakens their testimony to their children. It weakens the testimony to those outside. It weakens the testimony of the church as a whole. It also limits their ability to be generous, because maybe they can be generous with money, but they can't be generous with time or with presence because they don't even have the ability to do it inside of their own relationships.
Yeah, and I think that's something we really saw in our own story, that the more that we were misaligned from our values and misaligned from God's calling on us and our marriage and our family, it diminished our capacity to show up for others in the kingdom. We both had to step away from a lot of ministry work that we were doing because we were just so burnt out from the conflict and the lack of communication and even just the draining of trying to keep kids alive, right? That all of this was beginning to create a lot of fractures, and that one hurt our bottom line because I wasn't able to actually show up in my business. I burnt out and I had to shut this business down shortly after COVID, not necessarily because of COVID, but because by the time COVID hit, I was running on fumes and I was not putting the first things first. And so that really just weakened my capacity, but then also we weren't able to invest outside our home because we were just kind of spinning our wheels trying to keep everything afloat, and it was not going so well.
No, it was not at all.
Yeah.
Which takes us to the next point we want to talk about, that when we prioritize our marriages, we multiply the impact that it has. This is interesting because as we recovered and as we started to see God's calling for us to move into coaching, we had the opportunity to kind of lean into that, to do classes together, to start working in the field. And what I found is that what was overwhelming in my regular day job as a teacher, somehow I was able to buy more space as I took care of me, as I took care of our relationship, as we healed, I was able to go from being exhausted at the end of a day with one job to being able to do my full-time job, which had actually increased in its demands of me, and a full or a part-time job as a coach as well. And Melissa was able to do something very similar on her side just because her capacity grew.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so much of my mental and emotional capacity in particular had been diminished because of the unhealth that our marriage had been in before we really pursued healing and coaching. That now, with that weight lifted off of my shoulders, that I was no longer burdened by the disconnection in our marriage, that my capacity grew and I could be more involved. So I was still homeschooling our kids, but I was also stepping into my role as a coach. And I was also stepping back into ministry roles in our local body because I didn't feel so exhausted and so drained. So it really, what we witnessed as the negative impacts that really diminished our kingdom impact by not prioritizing and investing in our marriage. Now we were seeing the opposite happen when we chose to really spend time and focus on us and heal us, that by focusing on the right things, we actually were able to open up more doors and step into more roles and actually go outside the house more because we had more capacity and we just had more energy again to focus on multiple things.
Yeah. So when we're being intentional about connecting with our spouse, with each other, we feel safer in our relationships and we build a lot more trust. And that seems kind of obvious and also kind of simple. But the reality is, when I feel safe, I can kind of live larger. I can live more engaged because I know there's someone there who is with me, who is for me, and who will come alongside me if I need it. And it's just more fun. It empowers us to have the capacity to show up well in our business and our ministries because we're already practicing it in our marriage, in our families, right? With those that are, whether it's our kids or our nieces and nephews, brothers and sisters, whatever it looks like in our church. We are more empowered because we are already in a safe place and we know what it's like and it's a good place to fall back to.
Yeah. And part of that is that we also get to be an example of what healthy relationship and healthy marriage looks like. And this may be to our kids, again, to our local community and to our wider community that we are invested in, that they begin to feel safe and they begin to feel supported because they can see the strength in our leadership because of our teamwork, right? That we have fostered a strong team that empowers us to lead well, with our own kids. As we became healthier and stronger in our leadership at home, that really empowered our kids to feel safe and engage in more of the things that they're passionate about. And that includes business and entrepreneurship. We've got two very entrepreneurial kids so far, and they just love to explore their passions and test things out. And they feel safe doing that because they know they've got a strong support system with us as their parents and their family at home.
And oftentimes we think that the investment is those big things, right? It's date nights or it's vacations without the kids or it's marriage retreats. And those are great. We love those things,
We do.
especially when you have 6 kids. Anytime you can get away and have an uninterrupted conversation, it is wonderful. However, you can only do those so often and so frequently. The real things that make marriages feel connected, that make them connected and prioritized, is the daily and the weekly things. It's the intentional moments. It's the stopping to send a text, to check in, to give a phone call, to give each other a hug at the beginning of the day or the end of the day, because it has a compounding effect, right? It's all the intentional moments. One of the things I think is great that we've developed for us is that we like to send each other gifts or GIFs, depending on how you pronounce it,
Mhm.
right? The little images that you can text to each other.
Mhm.
And it's nothing serious. It's typically just a fun little way of connecting throughout the day. I will slip it in between calls or something like that, where it's just like, hey, I'm thinking of you. But what it does is it demonstrates to Melissa, she matters to me. I want to connect with her. She's the place where I want to be, wherever she's at. And the same thing goes when she reflects that back, right?
Yeah, I think also the more that we are intentional about acknowledging each other just in those passing moments, right? So RJ's talking about times where we may not be in the same space, because he's in his office coaching clients throughout the day. I'm bouncing between working with the kids in homeschool and also going and working with my own clients, that we're still checking in throughout the day, maybe via a text or a message. But then in those times when we do get to be together in the same space, that we acknowledge when the other person walks in the room, that we do little things like hugging each other during the day, or going on a short walk together, or we literally just walk laps around our front yard, because that's about what we're capable of doing in this season of life. But we have made that a priority. Things like holding hands when we're sitting together, right? And these are things that we have fostered and have grown over time, right? These aren't things when we were struggling and not in a great place. The idea of sitting and holding hands while we watched a show with the kids was not on the high end of my priority list, right? But as the work has been put in, now that's something I look forward to. Even just small, short check-ins and things like praying together at the end of the night have really become an important part of our daily rhythms and our weekly rhythms. And that's really what we want to lean into here, is again that there's a compounding effect in the small things we do throughout our days and weeks in our relationships that is what builds a stronger, healthier, more empowered marriage. It's not all the grand gestures. Those may be really helpful
Mm-hmm.
for certain seasons, but if you only go on a date night even once a week or once a month, that's not going to be building you up throughout the week. If you go to a marriage retreat, it may teach you a lot of really amazing skills and wonderful ideas, but if you don't implement those after you get back home, it's not going to have a lasting impact on your marriage and your home.
Yeah. And the increase in capacity doesn't just go in, I can do more things. It also allows you to lead more generously,
Yeah.
because you're in unity. There's not this other person back there that is in your mind taking time or energy. It's they're the primary, and whatever you give is given generously. And it also increases your creativity, because my guess is that your spouse is a very creative person who loves you. And so they will be able to give you a different perspective on the same thing. And so when you work alongside each other, even when it's not necessarily, their area of expertise, they may have a new idea or trigger a new idea in you because of the way in which you guys interact, right? You guys married for a reason, and God ordained that, and God is in that for some reason. And when we just set it aside because we think we know better, that doesn't help us. In addition to that, when we're able to be creative and be generous, it also is a great testimony to the rest of the world, right? A strong marriage is more important and more valuable than whatever the best strategy you have for business or for ministry is. Because at the end of the day, if they see you bickering with your spouse, you removed all of the goodwill and good thought you had. And it's not because that's what you desired, but because at the end of the day, they want to see who's the person who came up with this. Do they live and do they practice what they preach?
Yeah. Yeah. So we talked about, okay, small things, little gestures. What does this look like practically for us, our day to day, week to week? And what can we take home today to help improve our marriage and our relationship? And so we actually created this check-in that is specifically developed for couples who are working together in business or ministry, even if, they're officially partners in a business or partners in the ministry, no matter what we are doing, we view what we do as a team, whether it's RJ is the primary role in a certain ministry. I am there as his teammate to help support him and he and I the same. And then we do run a business together. But no matter what your roles are as a couple, you're doing things together. And so we created this check-in called the Grace check-in. We love a good acronym, helps us remember what we're supposed to be doing. And so there are 5 things that we check in with each other every week. And so this is a scheduled time that we have that we just sit down together, try to be as uninterrupted as possible, but we have kids and that's just the reality. We may get interrupted. So either way, we don't allow the possibility of interruption to stop us from making the time and doing it together. So we're going to just briefly walk you guys through the 5 things that we check in with the GRACE acronym, and then you guys can also learn more about this after the talk.
Yeah. So we start with the G, gratitude, right? It is what's one thing you're grateful for. It is always good to be grateful for whatever it is that you have in your life. And it doesn't have to be about business or marriage or ministry. It can just be like the sun was out today and that was nice. But what's something you're grateful for?
Yeah. And really, gratitude helps us to remember to shift our focus onto where God is providing for us and not where we may be having a lot of problems. And that mindset shift alone is really important. The next step in the check-in is R, which is reflection. And so this is where we really want to lean into where did we see God at work this past week in our marriage, in our business, in our ministry, in our family. And this just, again, points us even deeper into what is God doing in our lives.
So A is alignment, right? Where are we living in alignment with our core values? And where are we living out of alignment in our core values? That can go, or it should go for both us personally and in our relationship.
Yeah.
Right? Are we getting misaligned in some places? Maybe it's in how we spend our time or our money or our energy, or maybe we're reflecting on how we've been in alignment, right? How we handled the situation really well, or, that business decision is panning out well, and we need to see how is that aligning and why did it work well?
Yeah. The next step is to acknowledge challenges. And so this is really about looking forward and thinking ahead to what are the challenges that we are going to be facing coming up. Is it there's something just this week of, hey, we've got a lot of activities on the calendar and it is going to put a lot of demands on us? Is it a bigger challenge that we're facing in developing something new in our business or in our ministry? And how are we going to face that together, right? It's really about seeing the challenges ahead and working as a team to know how are we facing this together. If you have one partner who may be the lead in a ministry or business and the other spouse operating in the supporting role, then you can talk about, hey, you have to go on this big business trip. I'm going to be home with the kids. How are we going to support each other during this time? It's a really great way to get to be a team and come against challenges as a team rather than in competition or, that kind of view.
Yeah. It's also an opportunity for you to address challenges that you feel like may be happening in your relationship. And like we've mentioned before, we've had challenges that forced us to seek coaching. We didn't know that's what we needed. That wasn't what we were necessarily looking for. We just knew that it was beyond us. And so even just naming and addressing those challenges together and being like, are we at a place where we need to get help? Is it something we can just go to talk to friends about, right? Addressing those challenges and being honest about them is kind of the first step of resolving them. You can't even name them. They're going to kind of seep in and start and keep stealing energy.
Yeah.
The E is enjoyment, right? What's one way we can intentionally enjoy time with each other this week? Doesn't have to be big, doesn't have to be fancy. It can be something very simple, right? Like we're going to sit and have coffee or tea,
Yeah.
right? We're going to go for a walk. We're going to play a board game with the kids. But it's about setting an intention of what does enjoyment look like and prioritizing that, because that is an important part of our life in God. It's also an important part of our life in marriage and an important part of our life as a whole.
Yeah, absolutely. Because if we aren't enjoying time together on a regular basis, that is an indicator that something may be off in our relationship. So these are just these 5 things that we like to check in with each other every week and really intentionally get on the same page about, but also set a tone for our relationship and for our conversations that is balanced between these ideas of gratitude, reflection, alignment, challenges, and enjoyment.
Mm-hmm.
And what is great is that this structure is what helps us develop new habits of communication and new mindsets of focusing maybe more on the positive or being open to discussing hard things and challenges that we weren't open to discussing before. We just really want to you guys that when you put our marriage first, your business and your ministry is going to become the overflow, that our kingdom legacy multiplies when we are a united and solid team.
It goes back to the Genesis passage, be fruitful and multiply,
Mm-hmm.
right? That is obviously in that passage talking about children and multiplying the species. But I think it's more than that, right? It's multiply and then you can rule and subdue, right? And go into the world. But it all stems from this first place.
Yeah. So we want to make sure that you guys take advantage of this grace check-in that we have created and make sure to click the link here and to grab that. It is completely free for you guys, and start implementing that into your own weekly rhythms. And then we also just want to close with a blessing on all of you as you go forth, as you continue to learn from the summit, but also continue to invest in your marriage, your ministry, and your business.
I'm going to close with a blessing from Psalm 128. Blessed are all who fear the Lord, who walk in obedience to him. You will eat the fruit of your labor. Blessings and prosperity will be yours. Your wife will be like a fruitful vine within your house. Your children will be like the olive shoots around your table. Yes, this will be the blessing for the man who fears the Lord.
Thank you guys so much for being with us, and we hope to see you again soon.
Bye.
What you just heard isn't just a story about business. It's a story about discipleship through work. At IBAM, we believe business is one of God's most powerful tools to make disciples and build lasting impact. When you upgrade to the All Access Pass, you don't just get lifetime access to every session and the Kingdom Impact Playbook. You help fund entrepreneurs in impoverished nations, giving them the opportunity to build sustainable, gospel-centered businesses. $1,000 funds one new business. Our goal, 1 million entrepreneurs worldwide. Own the summit for life. Fuel the mission. Upgrade now and create eternal impact.